What's that? For
And call to order the Board of Adjustments. Brandy, would you please do a roll call?
yes, Aletsky.
Present.
Dolly.
Here.
Dargis Johnson. Here. Spire.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Pikacek.
Here.
And Culhane, Tate, LB, am I missing someone? Are absent. We have a quorum. And so it's just Board of Adjustment today, conditional uses. So we need 4 in the affirmative for a pass, for an approval.
Can I go ahead and get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then for the regular agenda, as Brandy noted, we have 2 items here. Excuse me, let's go back to the minutes from last meeting. Any discussion on the meeting minutes from last time amongst the board?
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Okay, motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye. Any opposed? Carries. All right, as Brandy just mentioned, for the regular agenda, we have 2 conditional uses. We're going to switch them up and address the Bravo first and then the Alpha item. So Brandy, would you go ahead and inform us on the 2 conditional uses?
Yes, thank you, Bill. So this conditional use request is for the property located on the southeast corner of 14th Street and 14th Avenue Southeast. This is currently city-owned property. It's approximately 3.08 acres. There was action at the Monday City Council meeting after a interested party, who is Jesse Keel with Compesca Builders LLC, approached the city with his interest in that property to develop it as contractor shops and storage yards. Obviously, that's just a 2-for-1, how it's written in the ordinance for the use. So then that was brought to City Council, and they approved surplusing the property and conveying it to the Watertown Development Company, who will facilitate this sale with the interested party. A condition of that prior to closing or the purchase is this conditional use, being that this is the intent for the developer of the property to construct storage units. Obviously, in this area, it's zoned C3 highway commercial, and we have multiple requests come forward for contractor shops, storage yards in this area. We've talked about how this probably should have been zoned I-1, just for the general nature of it, and just how it has naturally developed. But being that it is still C3, that is why this is before the board here for consideration. The other thing I'll note is the infrastructure and utilities. There is not, the property is not within 200 feet of the sanitary sewer main. So we did also memorialize a sanitary sewer easement that would run along the city property in the front yard, within the front yard setback anyway, here on the west side, and then on the south side, and then so it could, so they could do an extension, a sanitary sewer service extension down to the sanitary sewer main in 17th Avenue Southeast, if that is desired. Otherwise, they would be allowed to do sealed holding tanks.
If and when that, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Do you want me to?
Go ahead, Tom.
With that, I'll just stand by for questions. I'm done with the presentation.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, does this only include the southern lot there? Or does that include both the city lots to the north as well, that partial one up above it?
No, so it's just this piece here.
Just that
The
piece?
city
Okay.
will retain this piece.
Okay.
This is really with the access to 14th Avenue Southeast, having that frontage. That's why this is the area we're looking at.
Okay, Chair recognizes Mr. Case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brandy, so when you were talking about the easement for the sanitary sewer, if that was to be a sanitary sewer main that would go in, would they also have to pay for that? Would that be, is there any sort of right, is that gonna be a part of what you're talking about there with this, with the easement, is that they have to also pay, I can't remember the terminology.
The service line?
Yeah,
Yes, that would be on the developer, and we have specified that in the easement language, that that is a cost that has to be, that the developer has to bear. And it's really their option because they have, we would allow for them to do sealed holding tanks. You never can do a septic system in city limits, so that's not an option. But then if the developer chooses to extend a service line, so it's private, it wouldn't be public, that is their option.
Mr. Chair, follow up. Brandy, being that this property is C3 zoned and not I1, do we have sidewalk requirements in the C3 zones that we would have to omit from this use requirement? Or should that something that we should be considering as a requirement that they need to be putting in or not putting in sidewalk? I know there isn't not a lot of sidewalk in that area, but I know being that it's C3, do we need to have that as an attached, or is that just part of the design standards of that neighborhood?
You know, that's a very good point because they should have sidewalk, and I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look when the rest of these were developed why there was not the requirement for sidewalk. The only thing that's tough about it at this time is that since there are no other sidewalks in the area, to have somebody install them to nowhere for no connectivity. So it really, I would say, I'm assuming that most of the other properties had waiver of rights to protest.
That would be an appropriate amendment to the motion, or a part of the motion would be a waiver of right to protest sidewalks if required.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Chair. Just on that topic, though, Brandy, if you want to go just a little bit farther to the north, where they do have some residential property there, there is sidewalk along that stretch of those newer, I think they're townhouses there. And keeping sidewalk along at least the north-south road there down towards the park area would probably be wise from long-term planning standpoint.
Yeah, so that, and we can add that into the motion of having sidewalk on the west side and then a waiver of right to protest for the east-west portion along 14th Avenue. However you guys want, however you want to draft that. So that there would be sidewalk here. And then if you did the waiver of right to protest for that stretch, whatever, however somebody wants to make the motion.
There's a lot of families that ride their bikes and just go all the way to the park someday, too.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions from the board? Is there anyone in attendance that wishes to come forward and have anything to present on behalf of this conditional use? Okay, haven't heard none. Go ahead and open it for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve with the condition that we retain the sidewalk requirement on the west property line and get a waiver of right to protest for the sidewalk along the north.
Okay, is there anyone who will second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, we're having a motion and a second. Brandy, would you conduct a roll call vote, please?
Discussion on the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the public hearing, it was opened and closed.
I'm sorry, yeah.
There was somebody to speak on it.
My
Are you
fault, yeah.
fine?
Yeah, I'm okay. Come on back, yeah, please. Want to make sure, I didn't hear you or see you back there. My apologies. Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Greg Hansen. I own the building right to the right of that right there. So I purchased that lot July of 2017. And when I bought that property, I was told that that was a floodplain in that bottom left corner of my property. And I asked the city when I purchased the property if, would there ever be anything built there or put there at one point in time? And I was told by the city that it would never happen. And I was just kind of curious how it came about to this.
Yeah, I understand. Was that memorialized in any kind of permit or any other agreement?
I was just told it was a floodplain and nothing would ever be built there.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Brandy, in order for them to construct these storage buildings, they're going to have to elevate that property then and get a flood elevation certificate, or how's that work?
Yeah, so the pink out shading there, that is the 100-year floodplain, and then the grayish blue is 500 years, so that's not even considered part of the floodplain. So in the pink areas, though, they do have to make sure that that is raised. And then, and I believe that they plan on doing, bringing the fill and then going through the Lomar F process, which is the letter of map amendment based on fill. So that would be before, and then obviously when they go for the building permit, they have to submit the elevation certificate too.
Mr. Chair, to address Mr. Hansen's issue, as they grade and they fill, it will be done in such a fashion that there will be no water draining onto his property. I think that's probably what your
Right.
your concern is.
I don't have an issue with I don't have an issue with the project. I was just curious as to, I mean, I was told one thing and now that what I was told is not gonna happen is happening. That's why I'm just asking.
Time and people, that's usually what happens. But
Sure.
but the issue is that you shouldn't have any water from this property coming onto your property.
Well,
if
that's
it's
the
done
thing. I
right.
had to build my lot up quite a bit. So that's the thing that I'm worried about is running off towards him too, where that could be a conflict in the future too, where I don't want that to happen. So,
Yeah, and we'll, when he has his grading plan completed, and then we can look at how the entire grading ties into each other, so that there's in essence creating a swale between the two properties so that your drainage is not impacting anyone's structure. And then also just to address and Greg and I have spoke about this, and then I've also spoke with the city attorney, and council is looking at, which is why we reached out actually to First District today too, at creating a better process as far as when city property, it can be surplused and made available to the public. And because obviously, to Greg's point, that is disappointing when he had asked asked previously under different administrations or people involved, and then we have a new inquiry, and then it goes through. So that's unfortunate. So, however, we want to work to create a transparent process so that there's the opportunity for anyone. So it doesn't feel.
Exactly.
Oh.
I mean, because there's an opportunity there that if there were two interested parties, you maybe would have got more money out of the lot than the other one by transferring it one way or the other. So, yeah, we do need to look at having some sort of way of transferring property that belongs to the public. Not the
Because
city, but it belongs to all of us.
in the industry I'm in, I mean, there's no such thing as too much warehouse room. And if I would have known that there was a property adjoining to mine, that was gonna be available, it would have been nice to know, so I could have maybe tried to figure something out or talk to partners. So again, just mainly just have questions.
Does the city own the property on the north side of the road? There you go.
No. But that wouldn't be as ideal as adjacent. So what I said for the two of them, because obviously this is an established business, so there's economic development potential there too. So if the two parties are able to work together and make something work, that could be an option too. But yeah, it's adjacent to his property, so that's why it's ideal that he could expand.
I was just caught off guard when I got the letter, that's all. So, but no, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Just, is there anybody else that, as long as we got open comment open again? Okay,
Yes, you do. Okay.
all right. All right, I don't hear any.
I think he's the only open
Having
one.
said that, I'll close the open comment, and then Commissioner Dolly, would you like to amend your motion, given that testimony?
No.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and open it back up for discussion.
I think the proposal here is consistent with the neighborhood and other conditional uses that we passed in the area, so happy to proceed.
Okay, let's close it for the discussion. Brandy, go ahead and take a roll call vote.
All right. Kokachek,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the second agenda item, which is the Agenda A now.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So this is another conditional use request, and this is for a bar tavern expansion in the C3 commercial, highway commercial district. And when I pull up the area, you'll see that it's a kind of an oddly zoned area with it being C3 because it's not really adjacent to a highway. But it is 7 8th Street Southwest. And the board has seen this request come through in 2017 and then in 2020 or 2019. So originally, this is River Card Casino, and then there was a laundromat. And so the current owners and applicants, Rodney and Shirley Parent, are proposing to remove the laundromat area in the building and expand the entirety of their square footage to the bar, tavern, and casino. The bar and tavern, when that was approved in 2017, that was I think 420 square feet. 400, it was limited to 400 square feet. And it was functioning as an accessory use to the laundromat. And then it was actually requested in 2019 to expand that bar area, not to the entirety, to still keep the laundromat, but make a larger area, actually, and not really connected to the existing footprint that's in the southwest part of the building. And that was denied unanimously. And through discussion, and I attached the minutes to the agenda from those meetings, but largely it was the neighborhood concerns with the residential adjacent, and then parking, because the parking currently in this area, let me pull it up on GIS, is legal nonconforming because it actually uses the right-of-way for turning movements, but it's legal nonconforming, so it's fine. But for the use, when you're expanding that, then it requires additional parking spaces, and this site does not accommodate for that. So we discussed that with the parents and let them know that there is the availability or the allowance to do a shared parking agreement, and they were able to talk to their neighbors to the east, who are the Harms, AWA Properties. And they were able to establish a parking lot lease agreement. And so that allows for, hold on, let me get to these properties here. I'm gonna turn the floodplain off. Where am I? There we go. Okay, so this is the property at hand here, and then to the north as well. Okay, we'll get there. And then to the north here, the Peepers obviously received the conditional use not that long ago for the apartments that were renovated in that location. So then currently they have 10 spaces. I know on the agenda packet I put 12. It's 10. They need 24 with the square footage and then the use of a bar tavern. So the the Harms then, in their agreement, have outlined that they are able to utilize the parking on the west side of the structure and on this, along the south, which would allow for 14 additional spaces. They do have stipulations as far as like the timing where it's allowed. So that's from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. And have different clawbacks on there. And then a lease agreement that would be $100 a month to utilize that space. And then, but they also do have, it's a 1-year lease that is automatically renewed unless it's not. So the bad thing about that is I think it's an important component if this conditional use is allowed, and there may be other reasons through discussion of, or there are other factors as well. But I think, and I added that in the motion section, that if it is approved, I would say to make a condition to ensure that there is always a shared parking agreement as long as the bar tavern use exists. Because if that one falls through, like basically, it could be where it works for a year and then the lease isn't renewed and then we have a major parking problem. So I feel like that needs to be directly tied to the use and the expansion for this request. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Brandy, is the applicant or anyone on their behalf here?
Yes.
Do we want them to come forward to address the conditional request?
Can we just have questions of staff before we do that, Mr. Chair?
What's that?
Any precedent to have the applicant talk first or have a discussion amongst ourselves?
If you want to have board discussion first and then open the public hearing. However, I mean,
Historically, just up until this point, we've been, if we've had questions on the request itself, we've been asking staff for
Yeah.
clarification before we open up the public hearing.
Okay, let's
It's
go.
your call, you're the chair.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that, then we can have amongst the board here if there's any clarification for the staff. Go ahead.
I do have a
Mr. Cade.
question, Mr. Chair, and this goes back to 2020, when I was on the board then, too, my lord. And we addressed the variances associated with the property at that time regarding area width and off-street parking. And we approved a variance. I just couldn't remember, what was the off-street parking aspect of it, was there something regarding that variance that was granted in 2020? This was 5 years ago.
but
I want to know, what did we do with that variance?
well, I can look back at the minutes, but I believe, I mean, it was null because the conditional use wasn't approved. But it must have,
But we're not having a variance then today but do these same rules apply to this application today as it did then?
we didn't allow for shared parking agreements then. So that is what they would have been requesting the variance for not meeting the off-street parking.
So if this was to move forward, then they would meet the landscaping requirements as well are those landscape requirements that were in effect in 2020 still in effect today? Are they willing to comply with those requirements of the tree plantings that we had required then, I'm just trying to understand what's before us today. We have none of these variance requests that were associated 5 years ago. So we're going to make the assumption that they're going to comply with all these other things because there's questions regarding variances from area width. So how can we move forward if those same requirements are still in existence today?
So I have to look at what these variances are, but today, my take on it is that we're just asking about the use of the building, not the site, because the site's already developed and it's already a legal non-conforming lot that's developed.
But doesn't it still have to comport with, meets all the setbacks and everything? And they still, even if it's conforming, doesn't this give us our opportunity to talk and address landscaping requirements?
If you want, like if you want to add conditions, I just don't know how they're going to meet that.
I'm just guessing, that's the issue, I think, is that don't those requirements still apply when we have a change of use? I mean, that's what we were doing in 2020, and we're not doing it in 2025. So I'm just saying, has there been a policy change that's different, substantive to what we were doing 5 years ago? Do you understand what I'm asking, Blake?
Yeah, because the basis is there in the notes in terms of, we discussed at the time whether or not the variance was required for those other parts of the infrastructure.
And we acted on the motion of the appeal, but there's no appeal before us today, so I'm just saying, I'm assuming then that that those rules still apply, they're being applied to this application, and the applicant is going to comport with those rules.
Mr. Chair, on the, this is 3 different legal descriptions, right? Jim and Shelley Peepers, the laundromat, and then the bar. And here, the way I read it is that they're talking about the north lot. That would be on Kemp Avenue for Jim and Shelley's, and we're talking on the south side of the building for this, right?
No, we're talking about the entire building as a whole.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, when we also, that's a good point as far as when we didn't do a variance when we did the conditional use for Jim and Shelley Peepers. Because we're not we're just looking at the use, and then, I mean, the property has been developed. And so at whatever time, you can assume they got a variance because it's there.
But they didn't, because they were here 5 years ago asking for a variance. And I just can't remember specifically. It says grant variances from the area, the width, the off-street parking, boulevard landscaping, and infrastructure requirements. And my question is, has anything substantively changed to those same requirements in 2020 versus 2025 so that they're not having to ask for the same variance that they were asking for before when they wanted to expand a 400 square foot?
Yes.
So you see what I'm saying is, like, if we had to do it then and nothing has substantively changed, why aren't we having the variance request today in conjunction with the CUP request?
Yes.
That's my question.
Yep. So the thing that is I'm not even,
Substantively.
yeah, okay. Changed is the fact that the main issue here that they were not able to comply with, and I think it was kind of overkill of throwing all the other things in there too, but the main thing was the parking. And now we allow for the shared parking agreements, and that ordinance was amended in 2022 for the parking ordinance. So that was after it, and now there's that availability that they wouldn't have to get a variance for the parking.
So we are going to make them plant trees then on the north side of the property, comporting with the landscape ordinance.
That's not a part of the legal description.
Real quick, if I remember the Peepers request when it came before us, there was a discussion about the setback and the landscaping associated with that, as well as the parking. And I don't recall all the specifics of what the Peepers were granted, but I did know it was approved, and I believe it was for two units and 4 parking spaces, if I recall. And we did discuss in detail the green space requirement on the Kemp frontage. And I don't know if it would be helpful if we need to pull that back up, because that wasn't that long ago. That was, less than 2 years ago?
So that was all done through the conditional use, though. So you can set whatever conditions.
Saying, I don't recall specifically, it's not here in the packet, because that was a separate, request that came before us as a board for the Peepers to develop that unit.
Okay.
Were we included any of the parking spots to cover that need in the parking spots that are also covered here?
No. Nope. They're separate properties.
So for clarity, though, the north frontage, is that legally titled to the Peepers? And this is, we're looking at the 2/3 of the building, or whatever approximation is to the south of the Peepers.
Yep.
Which is the laundromat and the casino. And then they'd have to comport with any setback requirements on the 3/4 of that lot for their facing size of their building, right?
We are not we do not have a variance request before us.
Could you just again reiterate the parking? They need 28, but they only have 14 or whatever, and they're going to be borrowing some on a shared use agreement. But how concrete, what happens if that shared use agreement dissolves? What happens then?
So that's where I did explain that, where I think that if you should, I think you should tie, if this were to be approved, that should be a condition, that it is only allowed if there's that shared parking agreement, that's effective and in place. Because like I said, if we approve this and then the shared parking agreement, that's a private agreement, if that falls through and that goes away, then I feel like the use needs to be tied to that and also become void in that circumstance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So Brandy, what you're saying is we're going to get in the business of monitoring the leases then? Because how are we going to know if that lease falls through, the harms? How does, I
So
mean,
absolutely not. We will not be getting in the business of policing private agreements. So basically that would be by complaint. And I would imagine that the harms would reach out if something were to fall through. And also I would hope with the parents as well that they would be upfront and let us know. And because that is when that's when the use should also become void. But I have a feeling that if they are no longer allowed to park there and it's becoming an issue, that you'd hear about it pretty fast.
Mr. Chair, so follow up to that, then at that point, we force someone to close their business doors. I mean, that's what it would boil down to. After.
Yeah, they'd have to revert back to just their 400 square feet. But yes, that's tough because there's a lot riding on that as far as investment and expansion and yeah.
Mr. Chair, that was my next question is like if the worst case scenario happens, then they could like not use all of the buildings, so then their 14 parking spaces would work, right?
Yeah, they're 10. They only
They
have the 10.
wouldn't be, but they wouldn't be shut down. They could change their business plan, put up a wall or something, so then they only have to require that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And that is a great point, Bonnie, where for a bar tavern, basically then for what the square footage that they could have with the parking that they have on their site would be, so you need 1 per 150 square feet. So if we have 10, they could have 1,500 square feet. That was really easy math that I used my calculator for.
Mr. Chair, I also have a question for Brandy on the parking. You're saying the additional leased parking would be on the west side of the building?
Yes.
And maybe this will be a question for the petitioner, but do you know is there access from inside the building to that parking on the west side? Where are the entrances of the building located? Like, would someone have to walk around the back or walk around the front to get to the additional parking?
So they would actually just walk across the street. Because it'll be these, here, I'll take this zoning.
Did you say it was to the east or to the west?
Sorry, I might have said west.
Yeah.
It's on the west side of the
The old
building.
Dairy Queen. Okay.
So it's on the west side of this building at 722. No, sorry about that. Right.
Good question.
Mr. Chair, one final question here for Brandy. So there's 10 legal legal non-conforming spaces on the existing property. They need 28 total, so that's 18 parking spot.
24.
24. So 14 parking spots we need across the street in the shared agreement. If those are reserved for this use, does that leave the old Dairy Queen building with enough parking spots remaining to still be sufficient for that use?
Yes, it does. And honestly, even if it had, if that use changed too, and just depending on, for what it is today, they're good. If that use changed, that's something that, and say they were putting in something that needed additional parking and this was holding them back on that, that's obviously something that would change the lease agreement. but there is sufficient parking, yeah.
Mr. Chair, one last question for Brandy, and it's another what if. Say in the event the city did the right thing and got rid of the C3 zoning and came up with either a different zoning district or a different, more applicable zoning district, would the parking requirements change substantively between a C3 and a C2 or a commercial neighborhood or whatever?
No, because the parking is based on the use.
Did you hear from any of the neighbors?
Yes. Got a couple calls, and then obviously there will be people here for, to speak on the public hearing. And then there was just one neighbor directly to the south here, at 823 First Avenue, which I thought was directly to the south, was opposed to it. And I will find the owner of 823 First Avenue, right here. So not directly to the south, but to the south, just concerns about it being primarily residential and that it's not the appropriate neighborhood. So just relaying that. But yeah, otherwise, a couple phone calls in opposition.
This time, we have the applicant present. Did you want to speak on behalf of this conditional use request? And then if we have any questions as follow-up from the board.
Yeah. Yes, my name is Shirley Parent, and I am the owner of Rivercard Casino and Westside Laundry. Yeah, we decided to do some expansion because the laundromat, it's not worth to fix anymore. So.
Okay, does the board have any follow-up questions for the applicant? All right, go ahead.
So could you detail what, again, your hours of operation would be?
Yeah, we open at, right now, we try to open from 10 o'clock to 10 p.m. That's Monday through Thursday, but then Friday, we're pretty busy there, and Saturday. So we open from 10 to 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Have you had any instances where there have been the police called to your place of business to break up an altercation or cause problems at all
No,
during the
so
time that
far-
you've had that?
Yeah, so far I don't have any problem. I haven't.
Has any of your neighbors approached you in the last year or so since you've been running this operation to ask you to do something different with how you've been doing your business there?
Yeah, I had some phone calls, but then I fixed it right away.
And what have those complaints been?
When we do karaoke, and then
Just due to the noise, the volume?
yeah, and then I don't have any problem without to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Your hours of operation, you said from 10 a.m. The lease agreement for the parking spots starts at 5
Yeah,
p.m.
but excuse me, but we're not busy until like 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Do parking requirements, Brandy, in the city vary by hours for a use?
No.
So
No.
based on the use for the property, they have to have the parking 24 hours a day to cover the need?
Right.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for any of the public that is here, if they have any comments or want to address the request.
Hi, I'm Ruth Swenson, and I live across the street from the laundromat, and I've only lived there 58 years. I love that area, and it's been a nice, quiet area, basically. And I just think this business is not the type of business that would fit in that location. We have other businesses around, like Terry Peschel across the street, and I miss the Dairy Queen terribly. And the original agreement, when these people, when those two guys were here, and you allowed them to have the little casino just for relaxation for construction workers that were doing their laundry. And they assured us that it would be, that's it, that it would be that. In talking with a couple of neighbors, the one had to call the police, and she lives across the street from me to the north. And someone fell asleep on her porch, had tried to get into her house. And so then in the morning, excuse me, I have a dry mouth. In the morning, they called the police because she was sleeping on their porch. And another one said that she saw someone sleeping in their car, you know, that they couldn't be here today because of their jobs. And, you know, with the park only a block down, the kids on bicycles are all the time going down the street. And then I see kids walking by all the time. But we have a daycare also that has 26, 27 kids all day. And we have had such a wonderful neighborhood. We just don't want that expansion. In fact, none of us want that regular part that's there right now. So anyway, that's about all I have. Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ruth?
Ruth?
Yes?
Excuse me, I had a question.
Okay.
So if the board was to approve the ability to expand the existing casino, is there anything in your mind or in the mind of the neighbors that you've talked to that would make it, anything that the applicant could do that would make it better than, you know, mitigate the impact?
No, it's not going to be better.
It's an
because-
all or nothing kind of proposal.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it is. Since she took over, that really have been busy. There's been a lot of traffic and a lot of cars there. And, I mean, I don't know, I know the laundromat has gone downhill, but I don't know where those people park when they do come to do their laundry, because there's no parking spots left.
Thank you.
But I just really don't want it in the neighborhood. We've fought this a lot. Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that's in the audience who would like to come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Laren Blauer. I am currently a personal representative for 28th Street Southwest, is my grandpa's home. I am opposed to the expansion of the casino taking over the laundromat. First and foremost, my concern would be that this is a residential neighborhood, so I have some of the same concerns with late hours. Right now, as it sits, I guess I don't know what, you said that it's legal non-conforming, the parking that they have, but it's always double parked, I guess. I don't know how people who get there first ever leave, because it is too deep, at least, all the time. Another concern of mine would be allowing the shared parking lease. I don't know how you would ever enforce or attach that to the real estate at 722 West Kemp and see that that requirement sticks. The Harms have currently owned that for a year. It's changed hands several times since it was the old Dairy Queen. And unfortunately, businesses haven't really stuck around there. They haven't lasted. So the 1-year lease agreement that is in play right now to offer that additional parking space that is needed to meet the requirement, I don't think is sufficient and a good long-term strategy for the council to approve in order for this conditional use to pass. In addition to that, I mean, as far as a casino expansion, there already is a lot of refuse that ends up in my grandpa's yard, beer cans and things like that. I know that it already exists as a small little supplemental casino to offer reprieve while you're doing your laundry, as it was first introduced to the board. But expanding beyond that, I think, will have some deleterious effects in the neighborhood. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there anyone else that want to come forward?
I don't really want to come forward, actually.
All right, be brave.
Anyway, so I'm co-PR to 28th Street to my dad's property. That's my niece Laren. So last thing I'm going to just mention is many of the people in this room are my real estate clients. I get lots of calls from you guys every year asking about what's going to affect your property values. So sweet little Ruth, who's owned her home for 58 years, there's 10 others that have called me and talked to me about this since my parents both passed away. My mom would be here fighting tooth and nail about why this is a bad idea. But the majority of these people, this is their lifetime investment, is their homes, right? We're all watching the stock market do all of this. This is all that they have for their retirement. And I can tell you that putting a casino to that extent only and taking away the little laundromat, whether it's making money or not, making that expansion to only casino will kill their values. People are not going to want to be buying those residential homes with a full-blown casino in that neighborhood. So I think that's a very important consideration. If it was your parents' homes, I would ask you to think of it from that standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was Lynn Morris for the record.
Okay.
No introduction needed.
Okay. I think, looks like we've heard from all the personnel present here in the room. Do we have anyone online or anyone else that would like to come forward regarding this conditional use? Okay.
We're good.
I'd like to go ahead and close the public comment and then ask the board for any discussion we may have regarding this.
Mr. Chair, to get that on the table, I would just have a motion to approve so we can proceed with discussion.
Okay, anyone like to make a motion?
Second, my motion.
Oh, you made a motion already?
second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You didn't want to add the
I thought you were
condition?
saying
I'm starting with just a motion.
Gotcha.
Making a motion.
Amended several times before.
I'm not
Yes.
used to you making motions like that. You usually have a lot more detail you pack into them.
I think this is a good discussion. I think we should discuss it and then.
All right.
I will second
All
Todd's
right, we have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and open it up for discussion.
Make a motion to initiate discussion on this matter. I'm getting older and trying to remember what happened yesterday, as let alone 5 years ago. It's becoming more and more difficult. I do recall the conversations that we were having to a certain extent when it was talking about the expansion of the 400 square foot. And my recollection was that when it was originally sold to the board, the casino was to be just that, a place for people to have a beer, lose $20 while they're washing their clothes, or have the incidental use and being accessory to the laundromat. And then when it was subsequently came in to be expanded in 2020, in the 3 years from the initial startup, it was denied. At that point in time, I don't remember what the vote was, but I think that it was maybe unanimous. But I think that was part of it. I think some of it had to deal with the neighborhood not wanting to see the expansion occur. And again, it gets back to the other thing, could this building be used for something else? So, and it possibly could. I'm teetering yet on where I'm going to land, but I think that was my recollection is that we denied this expansion before due to those same reasons.
You know, I also was there, and I remember this place was packed both times.
Go ahead.
Chair. So I did vote no back in 2017 when I was on the board, and I would continue to stick with that. I agree with what Lynn said to, property value or not. And unfortunately, we have the commercial along Highway, or Kemp, which we discussed at length last time. That it's just, the way the ball bounces as the town develops.
Mr. Chair?
But,
Are you done, Rhonda?
no, well, just that, and the bigger problem for me would be this time is, again, the shared parking.
Thank you. That's what I was going to come back and say. That's what my problem is right now. Is I don't know, have we done many shared parking agreements before in the past? And do we have a mechanism to ensure compliance in the future? I find that to be problematic. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the expansion of the bar, but if we have design requirements for parking that we can't meet without some certainty that it's going to be in the future, I would hate to see the parents invest thousands of dollars into this building, then all of a sudden I turn around and buy the old Dairy Queen and turn it into something else, and then they lose that, and that potentially could happen to them as well. And so we're not doing them any favors by doing that.
Well, and for the record, Bill, sorry. I think when Peepers came forward with their apartment, if I recall, I don't think I was in favor of that either. Just because we were getting so many mixed use. We have apartment, then we have a bar, and then we have a laundromat. It was getting a little bit confused which direction we were trying to pull this particular property and back. I mean, that's just my own personal opinion. I think and again, I'm not telling it, I'm sure to find machines and upkeep on those are just horrendous. So I appreciate the fact that, it's probably hard to make a living doing that. But the neighborhood probably really needs that laundromat there. And again, I would just, I think it's just too many mixed uses.
So above and beyond the comments that we've heard from the board, my concern would be that this is a creative solution for the parking, this shared lease agreement. It spans a road. It's a city road. So that means you got foot traffic from now wholly a bar, in a casino. So it's going to be an expanded volume of patrons that are going to loiter out in quite a very open area. And it is very close proximity to residential neighborhood. And I am sympathetic to business owners and their desire to maximize the use of their property. But these other concerns I find, I don't know how you can mitigate them.
Just add too, so to my line of questioning earlier, I don't think that this really fits the bill for what the shared parking agreement is supposed to be used for. I think that's more designed for long-term development agreements between two parties, not for a short-term type lease. And I don't believe that you can only meet the parking requirements for a period of time throughout the day from 5 p.m. till 8 a.m. Nowhere else in town do we allow that for hour-based approach.
That's the thing that I was going to comment on with, I would worry about that precedent on allowing that limited amount of time on a shared parking agreement, as, we don't make people have different amounts for peak hours. And what would that mean for future developments and what that precedent would be?
Can I add too, so we haven't memorialized any shared parking agreements since that ordinance was amended in 2022. And the idea behind that when it was implemented is if really the best application of it is if it's under the same ownership. But that's just where, that's kind of how we envisioned it being used. This is a fine approach, but for the reasons, everything's valid for the reasons you guys are stating.
I would think that the shared would be if it runs concurrent, not a public street between the two shared agreements, between them, just concurrent or behind or something.
Unless I own both properties across the street, that would be.
And we allow it if it's within 300 feet. But yes, I do agree that trying to eliminate as much traffic crossing the street in areas that aren't crosswalks and whatnot is ideal. Well, it's dangerous, but avoiding it is ideal. Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve. Do we go ahead and take a roll call vote on that, Brandy?
Okay. Aletsky,
No.
Dolly,
No?
Dargis Johnson,
No.
Spire,
No.
Kays,
No.
Kokachek.
No.
Okay,
It's defeated.
I mean, still, I understand where she's coming from a business point of view. You know, you got to try and make it work.
Yep, but there's permitted uses that are still available that, that could be implemented there, so.
thank you. At this time, did we have any requests for any other public comment for, not on the agenda?
No, we did not.
Okay. Is there any new business among the board?
None that I have.
Brandy, did we have any old business that we need to address?
No.
Okay, I would like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? So adjourned.
All right, thanks, guys.